This sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension for lunch, this honorable chamber was in standing finance committee. To that we shall return.
Standing Finance Committee resumes. Doing the public service. Say again. Somebody. Head 13 to be wrapped up. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief on this matter. Contributing to the debate focus on Head 13, in the amount of $22 million. Much of what was said by the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, the Honourable Prime Minister, speaks to where the pain is being experienced in Barbados. And she very clearly alluded to the misfortune occasion in our economy in the light of the COVID event still ongoing, and very rightly suggested that we have come to a point in our national life, the likes of which is not to be found anywhere in our past history, especially since independence. And the pain is real, I think, is what she was acknowledging. Now, often we hear the boast by government that economy is doing well, country is in good hands. We hear similar phrases being touted by international institutions, particularly so the International Monetary Fund. Barbados is meeting all of its targets, the economy is on the right track and all of that. And we boast that the debt to GDP ratio is coming down, well, until recently. Foreign reserves are up and all of that. And these are boasts that we hear made frequently and from or by various voices. And I'm not here necessarily in this moment to debate that reality, but to point to the other reality, which often perhaps is overlooked or not too closely examined, and that is the pain on the ground that constitutes the reality for multiple thousands of individuals across Barbados, thousands of homes across this country. The single mothers, men who have lost their jobs in the light of the COVID experience, households with nobody employed at the moment. All of that is where the reality exists. And any member of parliament who is available to his or her constituents knows very well of that reality, because we're faced with it when the demands are brought squarely before our attention. And we have to find a means of responding to that. And I commend government for the responses which have been made thus far. And the monies being requested, as outlined before us, represents another attempt to further address those particular situations existent out there. So I am not here to quarrel with the money to be spent in addressing the plight of the poor and the unfortunate in Barbados, just to highlight again that when we talk of reserves, we talk of debt ratios and meeting fiscal targets, we are never to lose sight of the reality that people live, if you call it living in these circumstances, every day in Barbados, where the situation is one of painful misery. And we can't avoid being moved by that. So we support the need for help at the level of the state to provide for the assistance to these households and these individuals and these families. It would have been good if we could have been given some details, more specifically so as to the numbers of people being reached, especially in relation to where they are located. And I don't like to politicize these things because suffering is suffering, pain is pain. And it is humanity that is the subject of all of that. And I think if we're well-meaning people, we want to address the needs of humanity. But it would be good if we could have had some details as to where the monies thus far have been spent with respect to households and families. Speaking with reference to geography, you can look at that in the context of various parishes. You can look at it in an urban to rural context, or you can look at it in a constituency context. But it would be good if we could have the kind of reports to the Parliament when we vote for these kinds of sums that would suggest to us clearly here, the need exists here, need exists there, this money has been expended here, this money has been expended. So we're satisfied that we're seeing a fair attempt fairly to address the problem and to meet the needs, and that we are not having such criteria used as to make it very selective and perhaps some people be treated in a preferential manner as opposed to others. So I want to join with the Honorable Prime Minister, Member St. Michael Northeast, and the Honorable Member for St. Thomas as well, in expressing appreciation, especially on behalf of the people of St. Michael West, because we have been included in some of these efforts. And that's appreciation to the charitable organizations, particularly so in our case, the Sandy Lane Charitable Trust. I think they've done a commendable job, and one wonders what would have been the plight of many were it not for their contribution. And I know that daily we are bombarded with calls, people seeking help because they're aware that this program has been used to try to address the problem of some, and all can't be helped, and none can be helped to the extent that they need the help. But they've done a commendable job, and we've tried to be fair and impartial in our use of the resources that trust has put at our disposal. I did hear a statement recently from them that they're coming to the end of the program, and I wonder whether we go from there with respect to those who've become dependent upon that type of assistance. And I hope that perhaps I misheard, or perhaps there would be some reconsideration, or perhaps that further they can find some new injection of funds that the program could be sustained at least for a while longer. But we are very appreciative of the help that they administered, and I want to publicly go on record on behalf of people of St. Michael West in expressing that appreciation for the assistance that has come through the Sandy Lane Charitable Trust. Some of this money goes to the Rural Development Commission, Urban Development Commission. As far as I can see, and from my vantage point, there has been some uncertainty in recent years with respect to the role of these two commissions in former times under the former Barbados Labour Party administration. Certainly, as I've said before, they played a tremendously significant role in addressing issues of poverty in St. Michael West, changing the relationship of the people to the land in many instances through the urban land program, $250 per square foot program, we used to call it, many people call it, transfer of title program in St. Michael West, and several individuals were able to benefit from that program. And with respect to housing, repair of housing, and in many instances, building of new houses for several people across that constituency. But in subsequent times, the role of those two commissions has fallen into the realm of uncertainty from my vantage point. And even with the change of administration, I do not know that we've had any greater clarity with respect to specifically where they're and how they're focused these days in terms of the efforts. So I think we need to ask for clarity on that. Not even too sure where the responsibility now lies. I think it might be in the office of the Prime Minister for these two commissions. But certainly their role in helping with the address of poverty-related issues, land ownership issues, housing accommodation issues was pivotal then in terms of the response which was made. And I believe that remains the case because the need is still there. We need clarity, therefore, on their roles. I think if these commissions are active sufficiently so, again, and properly funded to the extent that we can in the constrained circumstances, then I think the Prime Minister alluded to this in passing reference, that we would see opportunity given to a number of small contractors to be involved in the enterprise of construction and building. And we need to have this kind of economic activity going so that these small businesses can have a measure of success, but that these small businesses themselves can become units for employment, because we are really looking down the barrel with respect to unemployment in Barbados these days. And if we're to keep economic activity going in the absence of the input from tourism and tourism-related activities, then if we talk about capital works and we talk about construction, we cannot leave out the small construction enterprises. We've got to be able to assist them. So I hope that we can get urban and rural up to speed such that many small contractors benefit and others can find employment through those entities. So I'm supportive of the money. I'm supportive of the money, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I rise to express my own thanks for the tremendous work that has been done between the Ministry of Finance and the private sector charities in providing for needy families in our community. I too am deeply grateful for what has happened in the constituency of St. James South. And I have to express that what I saw during COVID, people rising up together to do that traditional Barbadian thing of sharing and sharing alike. I really want to sincerely applaud citizens, clubs, groups, churches who've worked diligently to try to help us deal with a situation where so many of our people are not working. And in St. James South in particular, a number of our people worked with the hotels. So therefore there were a large number of families that were without work and without means. And therefore it was a lifeline to many young women with children, to many young men with kids who needed to have some means of being able to feed their families and feed their children. And therefore the supplementary that is going to be able to continue the program of the $600 for families is going to be indeed welcome. It has not been an easy journey, because it's trying to make sure that you find the people who are genuinely in need, ensuring that they get what they need, has been a challenge both for the government institutions and for MPs as well. And as was mentioned by other speakers, one of the things that was very painful to me was to find that in the midst of a COVID experience such as this, where everybody is at risk, even the very food that we need to put in our mouths, even the very shelter over our heads being at risk, that there were some families who were unable to pull together because of discord and disharmony. And therefore, COVID exposed a number of fissures in our social fabric, in our value system, that tested who we are as a people I myself find it challenging to imagine I could be in a home with brothers and sisters and someone gives me something and I, because of discord, would not share it with a sister's children. That to me was really challenging. And it made me realize that one of the things that we have to repair, beside the issue of jobs, is to repair the value system of Barbadians. To help Barbadians understand that a strong nation does not occur without strong families. And strong families have to embrace values of caring, values of sharing. They have to embrace values of forgiveness. They have to embrace values of diligence, of taking responsibility, of working together, honoring each other, respecting each other's space. And therefore, this is one of the areas that I feel we have to pay some attention to, because for our families to succeed, emerging from this COVID experience, it is going to take the strength of the value system of that family to help it to pull together at a time such as this. So this is one thing that is of great importance to me, and I am trusting that as the various entities that have responsibility for helping to build the social fabric and the value system, that they would be able to attend to this area here within the Barbadian society. Another thing that was mentioned by the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast was the issue of the need for people to return to the land. And I've never seen an example expressed and demonstrated so strongly as COVID laying bare the fact that Barbadians have departed from the land and that there's a need to re-engage in urban agriculture. That Barbados has become highly urbanized, but people need to understand the importance of planting. Now, I cannot say to you, Madam Chair, that planting has been something that I have been able to personally do. I now have to re-engage it and I'm willing to learn. So much so that in St. James South, what we did was we started an urban agriculture program to help families and myself to look to re-engage in how to plant, and that planting wholesome food is necessary also for us in defeating not just the hunger that comes from economic stresses produced by COVID, but also to help us defeat the NCDs. And therefore, I particularly want to rise and thank the Rotary Club South for the tremendous work they did during COVID, because along with the giving of hampers to families in Christchurch and other parishes, they also went out of their way to start the Owen Arthur Agro Kids agricultural project at 4 schools as a pilot with a view to looking at how it could be done in other schools. And I sincerely want to thank them, because unless we expose our children from early to growing things and understanding the importance of wholesome food, the only way sometimes to get a child to eat vegetables is if they grow them. As a matter of fact, the head teacher at the school in my constituency, West Terrace, when they first started the agricultural project, they said that the kids got so excited that they even ate okras raw. Yes, and they enjoyed it. And therefore, using this methodology to re-engage a new generation of Barbadians to begin to appreciate wholesome food in the way that our foreparents did. They ate wholesome food. I grew up with my grandmother making breadfruit and cassava and those basic things a central part of the diet for her family. It was only our generation that departed and ate a lot of processed foods, and look at the result now. So if COVID can help us to regain our footing in grabbing a hold of wholesome food, I believe that that is a positive thing that can come from our COVID experience. And along with the Rotary Club South, I also want to thank the Ministry of Agriculture, because as we've reached out in our constituency to help people to re-engage agricultural projects to grow stuff, it was amazing that there were a number of young people in my constituency who've grown up in an urban part of Barbados, but who really want to do agriculture. And the Ministry of Agriculture was very, very helpful, their technical officers, in having meetings, and we will continue to have more to assist them to get started. And so I was very happy to hear about the fact that even in urban Barbados, they can get involved in the Black Belly Sheep project, because I have 2 youngsters who are very, very keen on doing commercial level Black Belly Sheep farming. So I'm truly, truly looking forward to that. Going forward for this Christmas, and this is the last thing I will mention, Christmas will be very different this year for a number of families. But through you, Madam Chair, I want to say to Barbados, let us make this Christmas a Christmas with a difference. A Christmas with contentment, to take what we have, to share and make it work. Not to regret all the things that we would normally have been able to do, but because we are in a COVID period, that we make the necessary mental and emotional adjustments. And to make Christmas this time to be about relationships, to make Christmas time to be about contentment, Christmas time about harmony and coming together and sharing what we have. And on behalf of St. James South, I want to thank all of those entities, all of those charities who've gone out of their way to give of their substance to help us during this time, and the assistance that they're seeking to render us at Christmas time for the benefit of our families. And I pray that as we walk through and continue to journey through COVID, that some bounty will emerge from it. Not just the fact that we were able to survive it, not just that we were able to rebuild the economy, but that perhaps having gone through this experience, we would learn to express gratitude for companionship, gratitude for friendship, appreciation for our jobs, whatever it is, and to do those jobs with diligence, appreciation for those around us who help us, and an appreciation for family and values. And I'm trusting that that would be the legacy that COVID would leave with this country, so that we are better, stronger people for having gone through it. I'm obliged to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Michael East.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, okay, sorry. I thought we were more up to date with technology. And I'm glad to be here, and especially on this first day of my sister as a member of Parliament. Her Nubian presence has adorned the physical atmosphere. I'm not going to speak about physio or anything like that, but knowing that I have a greater collective strength, especially to speak on the behalf of poverty. But when we speak about workers in Barbados, we're talking about poverty as well. It's almost synonymous. We're talking about blackness as well. These things, they have a number of common threads running through them. So I'm inspired today by her presence, and I want to wish her well. I hope that she continues to demonstrate the kind of courage that we have observed her. I'm not even speaking about the intellectual capacity and the vision, but the kind of courage that is required in these halls of Parliament. You are in an environment sometimes which is very difficult to find the balance because of the dominating presence of the Barbados Labour Party as the leading party in the halls of Parliament. And you always have to be very careful, madam, in holding a position which is very, very objective without any contemptuous feelings. And there's some people who are so strongly institutionalized that they become fanatical. And sometimes when you say anything and it sounds a little out of the balance. They perceive you as an enemy of the institution, even the institution of Parliament itself. So that is my view, so don't believe it's the view of the world at large. It is my view, and I say that to you in good faith. Madam, my major interest in politics today is to fight for the eradication of poverty. And as I said to you, the eradication of poverty is about my people, poor people. I'm not going to exclude those people from St. John or St. Joseph or those persons who are of Irish background and have had to struggle with poverty, because my fight also includes them. I don't want to say they're not my brothers and sisters, but they're my allies. And therefore, I believe that I need to put a case for them as well. The fight of the Barbados Labour Party, even in the days of T.T. Lewis, who was an ordinary worker and had to seek the support of the Barbados Workers' Union, and had to seek the support of Grantley Herbert Adams when he came into conflict with the employers across Barbados. In other words, those people who extracted wealth from this country have always placed us in a subordinate role. They graduate from seeing us as not being human beings to the point where we became second-class citizens in our own land. The situation is very much the same. I know it because I live it every day. There are people who believe that people who live in poverty, that the master cursed them. And that is the lot that have been dedicated to them by the master itself. So some people even tell you that poverty will always be with us. So in other words, it is persistent poverty over and over again. The cycle comes around. So when we talk about poverty in the 1930s, and we talk about obviously poverty during the period of the enslavement, right? And then at one point in history, you might say that we're making some progress and we're seeing development. And then something comes, and then people seek to rationalize why poverty is here with us again, because it is now COVID. Now the system itself is impregnated with a preservation of keeping people living in ignorance and poverty. Capitalism is all about exploiting the poverty-stricken people in the society and always having surplus labor. Because the economy demands that you have surplus labor so you can get labor cheap, especially among the working class people. Sometimes the school system, you hear in here too, in the school system, they already divided the masses in a form of social stratification, that they know at the bottom of the social and economic ladder, there's a broad base in the pyramid that holds a whole set of unskilled people, or people whose skills are no longer of any validity. They keep these people at the bottom of the base so that they can continue to get cheap labor. And therefore, even in thinking about having the presence of a Barbados Workers' Union leader in this parliament, having a responsibility, not just to the party itself, but having a responsibility to this struggle, this fight of labor at this very point in history is an imperative. I strongly believe that you are here at the right time in history. This parliament has seen many trade union leaders before. Don't mind people who have been involved in all forms of dramaturgical approaches. There's a whole set of people out there in the political arena in the last few weeks with into all forms of theatrics. Why you shouldn't be here. Some of them might even believe that you shouldn't be here because you're a woman in politics. And even if you're a woman in politics, you ought not to be at the leadership in this business. And it is good because you must be very, very clear on those perceptions that are out there, sometimes even bandied about by people who call themselves intellectuals, and should be making a fair and objective analysis of your right to be here in Parliament with us. And I want to tell you, you are in the right institution. I can't tell you that institutions remain fixed in behavior, because the Republican Party in the United States of America was in the forefront of the Black Reconstruction. Today, there's the most extreme, reactionary, white supremacist in the presidency of the United States of America. Back then, the people who played a meaningful role in the development of the United States of America during that Black Reconstruction period, it was the Republican Party who facilitated that. So I'm not going to tell you that this institution or any other institution, there was a time when Barbara in the public field that the Democratic Labour Party was addressing issues of poverty. So when we come to Parliament, they would be elated to talk about these large sums of money that we are putting and making available to major institutions of the state. The Barbados Labour Party itself was formed out of circumstances that derived from out of poverty, that created the conflict between labor and capital, that the white aristocracy who dominated in those times, and the ordinary working class people had to face off into conflict in the 1930s and gave rise to both institutions, the BLP and the DLP. We are now back on track, because the two, it was most unfortunate where the two institutions were separated in addressing issues of poverty. And I would expect that as we go forward, we should be back on track, back on the correct trajectory that is so necessary at this specific time, fighting not only against local capital abuse and exploitation, but also international capital abuse and exploitation itself. And some of it manifested itself through the means of information technology. And you got parrots in the society talking about this thing as a generalization and believing that as long as you're moving along information technology, they can't even see how it enslaves people. So I am glad that you're here, and I will hope that you will help me as a student to be enlightened on how we move forward. I want to thank the Barbados Labour Party at this time for responding to the needs of the poor. Poverty eradication is still the theme. It does not get old. It does not get old. Poverty alleviation is still our theme. We were not saying it in the 40s, we were not saying it in the 50s, but the concept, the theme of poverty eradication came up in the 1990s underneath the Right Honorable, the late Right Honorable Owen Seymour Arthur. And as I said then, the two institutions, or two of the main institutions that would address the concerns of poverty, are the two institutions that were formed under him in the 1990s, I think around 1998. And that is the urban development and the rural development. I am pleased to say to you, for those who don't know, that the Prime Minister has asked me to work with her in doing all that I can to address these imbalances in the system, especially through the Urban Development and the Rural Development Commission. I've been asked to address other, but this is also elements of poverty and ignorance, addressing the imbalances that relate to culture itself. I am happy to be able to work with Minister King in trying to move forward with this program. This is an affirmative action program, so when the minister is responsible for community empowerment, when I came in a bit late and I heard the minister talking about this program, I said, these are things that we have to do. We may differ on one or two things, but I strongly support her especially because of her long commitment. From the time she came into Parliament, she always stood on track, seeing herself as a representative of the poor. Not from on high, but she was a representative of the poor because it is her life experience. And she's where she is today because she understands the struggle of the poor. So I would believe, without any embarrassment to any one of us, we know about pit toilets. We know about pit toilets. And no modern civil individual can feel good because he can defecate our water. Can feel good to go as a friend or to know that a friend has to journey out in the middle of the yard at midnight to be confronted with that kind of perfume emanating from those little box things with a big hole. If you don't watch yourself, you try to do it, you drop through the hole and go down the pit itself. Right? So if a government talking about representing people and understand the social problems that we face as poor people, well, obviously the eradication of pit toilets must be very high on the agenda. I only got 2 minutes. We're talking. All right? Oh, you upset me, man. The reality is that we have serious problems, and I am happy. Look, I got to be jumping all over the place with these limitations, and so I hope that one day we will be able to give us a little more flexibility, at least to speak on important subject matters, because it is not supposed to be done as a ritual.
That's 30 seconds already.
Oh, go ahead. And the reality is, ma'am, is that I would like a lot of credit to be given to a lot of ordinary working class groups on the ground. And I want to thank the government for these few millions of dollars. I think they say it's about a little over 10 million. It's about that. And but the NGOs movements. And when I'm talking about NGO movements, I want to talk it straight. I'm not talking about people who only can give to organizations. Poor people, NGOs, contribute in a very meaningful way to helping us to address this problem of ignorance and poverty and education. And the reality is that we keep praising those persons who are fortunate. I am grateful, at least, that Sandy Lane and some of these institutions is giving back some of what they took. I am glad for that. But I also want to be able to say to you that I am happy for other organizations like the Israel Loving Foundation and Pinelands and the Salvation Army to be able to give service because they don't have money. But these people that accumulate the wealth over the years, I'm not setting Sandy Lane as an example because I cannot damn people who have been helpful to us. But I'm talking about there are certain institutions in this country that extract the wealth from the first day of slavery, still own the lands, still own the businesses, still take the money out of the resources of this country and put it into the expansionist program abroad. And they don't even want to give back a cent. It shows you they had never had any interest in the development of the poor people of this country. Their only interest was continue to exploit and abuse poor black people. Black people! That's all that they did over the years. And it has to change. It is the mission that was assigned to us as a political party. You think that the uprising in the 1930s was about some social event where people were celebrating? It was a celebration. People were fighting for survival. We are now at a crisis point. Not only because of COVID, but because of the mechanisms at the highest level of the control of capital and the availability of capital to ourselves as a government. We don't have the reserves. We don't have the foreign reserves. We boast about if we got $2.something billion. These people take up money from this country and build up parts of the United Kingdom, build up parts of the USA, build up parts all over the world. Wherever you go, these traditional businesses got other legal entities established. And you are now seeing a whole population declining rapidly into a state of poverty that they have never seen since the 1930s. All the surveys, even before COVID, indicate that we were declining at a rapid rate. The last one we had is the analysis on poverty. Before that, we had the IADB analysis on poverty. And after the IADB analysis, and we had analysis, the report shows that we were on the rapid path of decline. And then COVID came along. And the situation is worse. People all around the community, not because of any fault of government, but how you can have people that got this abundance of resources in this country, and probably one or two institutions that know they have been the beneficiaries and being honored by being called a philanthropist. What piss what? What philanthropist? For what, doing what? Giving back a small sum back to the society in which they're extracting wealth for a number of years, but they're doing more than others that don't do anything. There are a lot of big name companies in this country that would not give back anything to the poor. When the workers want to leave those institutions, they do everything so they don't have to pay them any form of compensation for the services. And they pull the energy out of these people for the entire life that they had, especially the ones who claim they've been the most loyal people to these institutions. And now we're watching poor people every day as MPs come into our houses asking for help. People can't pay their light bills. People can't pay their water bills. People can't pay house rent. Conflict emerging between landlords and tenants as a consequence of can't honor their payments. Courts coming back for people's furniture. All of these things happening in Barbados today. And superficial analysis sometimes make people believe it's the government. The government is the people who hold capital in their hands. Must understand where we are at this moment. And if the government don't do what we are doing as a form of mitigation, the reality that we will see the same thing in 2020 that we saw in 1937. That is all it is. This
Honourable
government...
Member, I'm waiting for your phrase, and in conclusion...
Madam Chair, you have been so generous to me.
I know.
I would love to be able to exploit the generosity, but I understand you have a responsibility. I know we have to play by the rules, and although I might not be able to deliver it as thoroughly as I would like to, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to say in a few words, and hopefully I'll be able to give you chapter 2 on another day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honourable Member for St. Michael's South.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's always a pleasure to listen to the Honourable Member for St. Michael East and to be inspired to speak on a topic that obviously appeals to me for a number of reasons. I will be very brief, Madam Chair. There are two speeches that I recall that have inspired me when it comes to this particular topic, Madam Chair, in relation to this resolution, really, and our need to help those who are most vulnerable. The first was a speech Owen Arthur gave in the Pine, I think in the late 90s. In that speech, he spoke about his vision and stopping poor people from being poor. And I must say that I cannot recall all that he said, except that being born as a poor child myself, I felt at the end of it that in this Barbados, we could do anything we set our minds to do. The other was a speech the Prime Minister gave. I don't know if it was so much a speech or a pep talk to the Cabinet before Cabinet had started. And she spoke then about the need for us to, as she calls it, complete the circle of enfranchisement. Her vision also for stopping poor people from being poor, but taking Barbados to that other level, given the challenges that a modern Barbados faces. The truth is many of us, or many people, often speak about those who've gone. We speak about Brandy Adams, we speak about Earl Barrow, and while I am forever thankful to these men, these stalwarts, these giants, the truth is that the challenges before us, were we to somehow find a way to resurrect these great men, they would find themselves in completely foreign territory. What the benefit of Barrow and Adams and so on was not what they did necessarily, but the way they thought, the way they viewed the world, the way they viewed Barbados, the way they positioned Barbados. And it's the same thinking that I now see, Madam Chair and the Prime Minister. Her thinking as we try now to challenge a social system that does not necessarily favor small island developing states. And there are new challenges that we must face and new challenges that we must address. I keep hearing over the last few weeks this idea that Barbados is not only an economy, it is a society. And while that is true, there is a point at which that is so simple. And yet a point at which I watch people stagger over it, perhaps because they don't have the intellectual capacity to fully grasp what they're saying. But the truth of the matter is, if any of us in this room attempt to divorce economic growth, or at least some kind of economic activity from our social benefits, we will find ourselves struggling for it. That a country must have a bit of both. You need to have sound economic policies, but you must not allow your sound economic policies to be the main driving force of your politics. Because at the end of the day, we want to reinforce and to serve those who are in society and those who need it most. And I believe, since we came into office, with the vision that we must complete the circle of enfranchisement, that the politics of this Barbados Labour Party government has been to service the poorest of the poor in this country. I believe that all that we have done, sir, has been to the benefits of those who are struggling and those who, under normal circumstances, would find themselves extremely vulnerable. And we have, Madam Chair, to understand what development really is about. If we accept that development at its core is about social change, it's not just about policies and programs and the things we do, it is about social change. And therefore, for all of us who are in this place at this time, sir, we are all parts, little parts of this whole process of driving change, but positive social change, so that people could benefit in this country. When we were in the Ministry of formerly Social Transformation, then Social Care, and now People's Empowerment, there was a concept developed where, if you understand it, it's almost like a pyramid. And at the base of the pyramid would be those who are in need of help. So the structure that I'm sure the Honourable Member for St. Thomas understands and would be able to explain probably better than me. At the base of the structure is those persons you must identify. So the whole process they call IC. So the base is those people who are in need, and that's your identification. Just above that are those who need help, and that is stabilization. Immediately above that would be the people you need to help who are moving towards something, that's enablement. And the final point of the pyramid would be empowerment. So you have a massive base of people who you need to identify who are in need of help, a massive base of people who need to be stabilized, and then it gets narrower, enablement and empowerment. It would be nice for us to say as a government that we came and that we reduced the number of persons who needed to be stabilized because we've so helped them. And we've taken more people to the point where they needed to be assisted to the point where they could support themselves and be enabled and empowered. That is the command, that is the charge of this government. That is what we came to public life to do. But that nobody can deny, Madam Chair, that COVID has been a shifter. COVID has been such a game changer for all of us. We opened 2020 believing that we were going to do a year of gathering and that we were going to have a number of people into Barbados. There are very few Barbadians, very few, who woke up on the 1st of January 2020 not feeling much better than the way they did when they woke on the 1st of January 2018. Because in the few years that we were in power, we did all the things that we needed to do, not only to restore faith to an economy, but to restore faith to people. But that COVID really has been a significant game changer. So when we sat down, or when we sit down to understand social development, ma'am, there are three things that you must understand. Social development will always be about how needs are met, how problems are managed, and what opportunities for advancement you give to people. Always. How needs are met, how problems are managed, and what opportunities for advancement exist in that country. In our instance, Madam Chair, in all three. We had, well, the first two for sure, we had a lot more needs to deal with. COVID has shifted the foundation on which we were operating. Then, of course, because consequently, as we all know, when times get hard, you have a lot more problems to manage. And we've seen the manifestation in terms of our social problems. We've seen it. We've also seen, Madam Chair, that a lot of this has also started perhaps from 2005, 2006, if you're being honest. And that we needed to restructure the way we go about handling our business. The Honourable Member for St. Thomas would also tell you that I'm now the Vice Chair of a committee where she is working actively to restructure the entire ministry, to be able to address these challenges, to make the ministry fit for purpose, to deal with the challenges that have now emerged, so that we are not doing the things that were formerly done. We are doing new things to address new and emerging problems. And that at the end of it all, we will be able to say that we created a system that is fit for the times and fit for purpose. I feel, in much the same way as the Honourable Member for St. Michael East feels, that there are those in the private sector perhaps who could do more, who could lend themselves to support the social system more, who could help poor people more. Of course I do. But I want to thank very genuinely those who step forward to help. I want to thank the Sandy Lane Charitable Trust, because the truth is, for myself and for many other members in this place, the support that we got from them, Madam Chair, has allowed us to be able to satisfy the same needs that I spoke about as being very important for social development. I want to thank them from this place because they've done a lot for all of us in this room. I also want to thank the number of people, some people, Madam Chair, dropped by my office as well as other people's offices and donated all kinds of things. If COVID has taught me anything, it is not that we are less people or less human than we were. In fact, the opposite is true. I have seen an expansion in the human capacity during COVID. I have seen people do things for other people during COVID. And COVID, while COVID has been hard on us, it has taught us that we have the resilience to bear, but it has also taught us that we can do much more with the little that we have. And I think, Madam Chair, that I feel better about the way Barbados has responded to COVID than I do about many things. I really do. And it has taught me that over the next few years that perhaps there's some changes and some shifts that we have to make, but that we can continue to do more. So in this particular resolution, Madam Chair, I only asked for a few minutes, but in this particular resolution, Madam Chair, we are offering for the Household Survivor Program an additional $10 million. $10 million. The Honourable Member for St. James Central, when he spoke recently at a meeting, he explained that across the Caribbean, $10 million was more than the total sum of all of their social contributions during COVID. But this is only one, and this is in addition to. So the government of Barbados has committed its financial resources to resolving this challenge in a way that other governments in the Caribbean could not do or did not do. That's the first thing. We've also put $5 million toward urban and 7.5 toward rural to tackle the pit toilet situation. I know what it is to use a pit toilet as a child. I know what it is to use one when I visited my sister in my early 20s, because she still had one. And there is no shame in having a pit toilet, but that a country that has progressed must progress for all of its citizens. A country that has developed must develop for all of its citizens. Or what you have, Madam Chair, instead of having proper social development, what you have is what is referred to as distorted development. And when you have a situation of distorted development, it is necessary for you as a government to put in place policies and programs to lead effectively to the kind of change that you want and address these things. So that is why you are seeing us doing what we are doing, to be able to address what would necessarily be distorted development. And I am very pleased, I must tell you, to be able to say to my constituents that this government has put in place the funds, put the money where their mouth is, to be able to tackle pit toilets in this country. Because people were talking about it for a long time. Madam Chair. So the government, if any accusations can be thrown at this government, it can only be that the government is doing above and beyond in these circumstances, because they're not easy. It is not easy to be able to address a situation such as COVID. international, big, large countries are struggling with it. You know, I would close, Madam Chair, on the point of a friend of mine messaged me earlier while we were having lunch about her interest on her mortgage, on a loan. And that when she's been paying this loan, she went to the bank thinking, oh, that she's at a position where, having paid for so long, that her, you know, what she owes has come down. But that her payments, having made every single payment, if you calculate, she should be at almost about half. But when she considers what she still owes, it is almost as if all of the money has gone to the interest, and the principal still is there. And there's a conversation that I feel that we now have to have with banks in this country, to the extent that we have people who go before these institutions who are in need of assistance, and that when the financial, you know, you're saying because you really need it, but you barely have the wherewithal to be able to survive. And that you pay and you pay and you pay, and then you end up owing almost as much, sometimes you end up owing more than you borrowed after you've paid. These things, Madam Chair, we have as a government, Madam Chair, to be able to protect the poorest of the poor in this country. And I understand that's the way the banks work, but I also understand that we have a duty to be able to help people, because the moment that you move from one category to the next, you then find yourself so exposed. You get a little job as a clerical officer, you got to pay for every single thing under the sun, and then eventually, you're finding yourself still struggling as if you never made it. So I want to close by commending the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Minister responsible for people's empowerment for the work that has been done in the social sector. I understand that even in this country, we would have limits to our capacity to be able to respond in terms of our physical resources, of course, but that our mental resources remain in abundance. Our mental resources remain in abundance. It would be an injustice in this country to feel that we cannot call upon every single man and woman in this country to be able to help us develop Barbados. It would be an injustice for us to feel that what we did yesterday in removing Nelson from the heart of our city does not speak volumes to the young boys and young girls in this country. It would be an injustice if all of us in this room do not feel that we have a responsibility, Madam Chair, to contribute something to uplift other people. I am very proud and happy to be a member of this Barbados Labour Party. And when I serve with men and women that I know give their all every single day in what has to be the greatest fight for any government in this country, probably ever, considering what we are dealing with COVID. And sometimes we can be very, very hard on ourselves as a government, because we set the bar so high for ourselves. We can be very, very hard on ourselves as a people because of the way Barbados aspires. But I am very proud, Madam Chair, of the work that the government has done. So I wish to close by supporting this resolution, by telling the people of St. Michael's South, who still have, a few of them who still have pit toilets, that better days are coming, thanks to this government. And to be able to face my constituents and to say we have done the best that we can do in the most difficult of circumstances. Madam Chair, I wish to thank you and I support the resolution.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the first conversation I ever had with any constituent of St. Michael South Central in an effort to serve politically in this country was 4 years ago. And that conversation was initiated by a young man who came to me and said, I don't want anything, but there are some people that really need help. And there's an old lady that I want you to look out for. She lives next door to me. And I hear her early in the morning or late at night in the yard, sometimes knocking over things. Sometimes she can't see properly to get outside to use the bathroom. And he said to me, looking me directly in the eye, he said, and when I hear her out there, I make sure I don't go back to sleep until I hear her get back inside. Because I want to make sure that nothing happens to her one of these nights when she is out there struggling to do something that all of us should be able to do with comfort. And this is a young man who people will pass and see him lying under the tree, and people will say, well, this is one of these fellas off the block, and people will have all kinds of characterizations. But I've never forgotten him, and I've never forgotten the conversation, because it represents to me something that the Honorable Member for St. Michael South just spoke to, which is about the heart of Barbadian people, which is about the fact that in an environment where it may have been something that was not unsurprising if that young man had come and said, well, I need this and I need that. But what he wanted to discuss and what was foremost on his mind was the well-being of members of his community. And that conversation is one of the things that drives me in my work in the constituency, that drives me in my work in this honorable chamber, and in the ministry of which I am a part. My brother, the Honorable Member for St. Michael East, spoke about poverty. And I understand the struggle. The struggle is important. But the truth is that that's not even language that I use any longer. Because when you talk about poverty alleviation, you're talking only about the absence of poverty. You're talking about helping a little bit to make sure that these people are no longer at the bottom. I started to work in an institution some years ago where they asked me to manage a program that they were calling poverty reduction. They said to me, I want you to be the manager of the poverty reduction program. And I sat there in that chair for some weeks, and it occurred to me that that program was trying to do something that to me did not characterize Barbados. Because Barbados always, in my understanding growing up, always tries to do more than just the bare minimum. Always tries to do much more than just the bare minimum. And so I went to the head of the office and I said, I am not managing anything named poverty reduction. If y'all want me to stay here, you have to change this to economic security. Because we are not just trying to bring about the absence of poverty. It is the reason, for example, that this Barbados Party administration named the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Because you are not just talking about the absence of disease and illness, you are talking about thriving. And so I understand that we want to address poverty, but the truth is that if we don't strive for economic security, we will always think that there are only a handful of people that fit into this category called the poor, capital T, capital P, and that we channel resources to them, and once we're done with them, we're done. As the Honorable Member for St. Michael Northeast says, the Honorable Prime Minister, I am not in that. Because what we are here to do is to create wealth and prosperity for all Barbadians. It's not just the absence of poverty that we are here for. Now, there are times when we will have to get people through a difficult situation. And that is why these 10 million for the household survival program that has already helped in excess of 3,500 families is so important. And COVID has shown us that sometimes people just need an ease. People just need some help to get by. But if we only focus on that capital T, capital P, the poor, we are going to miss people like the family or the young lady that the Honorable Member for St. Michael South just referred to. We're going to miss people who are the working poor. Because here's the thing about poverty. They draw a line, and they tell you they've got some people under that line and some people above that line. And this money here is only supposed to help people under that line. But what about the people who are barely above the line? What about the people who are well above the line today, But then they have a family member who calls them and says, listen, I need this particular service, or I need some help getting overseas to get some medical care. All the money gone. Every dollar burned. And you now need the kind of help that programs like the Household Survival Program make available to you. You're not categorized as poor by your income, but there comes a time when you might need a little help. And so all of these notions of how to measure people's well-being and all of these things and all of these proxy means tests and all of this, sometimes they don't show you the real picture, which is that sometimes in all of our lives, there comes a moment when we need a little ease. And that's why this Household Survival Program is so important. But because we are targeting economic security, Madam Chair, it is not just about programs like this. It is about all the other kinds of programs, all the other things that we are executing now to be able to bring about real economic security for Barbadians today. Now, it really warmed my heart, if I'm being honest, to hear the member for St. Michael West make reference to some of the things that we've already said we are doing. He framed it as a call for action, but it still suggests to me that when I and some of my other colleagues get up in this place and talk, that at least he's listening. Because he suggested that the Urban Development Commission and the Rural Development Commission need to be engaged to be able to provide opportunities for small contractors in the work that they're doing, which is precisely what we have stood on this floor and explained time and time again in terms of the way in which not just the Urban Development Commission is working, but the way in which we're approaching investment in this country. Now, the reason that this government has embarked upon a ramped-up capital works program, has rolled out a $40 million COVID relief program, is that we realize that in a scenario where the private sector is contracting beyond where we would want to see it, that government now has to step in and play a particular role in the interim. While we continue to try to stimulate private investment, but we have to make sure that people are getting by and getting through. And so that is the reason that in our efforts such as Golden Square and the Fairchild Street Terminal and the Fairchild Street Market and all of these other initiatives, they have been engineered to provide opportunities for small contractors. So it's heartwarming to see that the honorable member, the honorable leader of the opposition, is listening to the policies that we espouse in this place and hopefully learning. Madam Chair, I say all that to suggest to you that both of these programs represented in this request for supplementary under Head 13 reflect a reorientation to understand that even in a recession or even in a situation where a global economy is experiencing severe stress, there are things that governments can do to make sure that people are not just earning enough to eat, but are earning opportunities on which platform they can build to thrive. You see, the Barbados, where I was born and where I grew up, is a place where we are setting global examples of how even in a pandemic, you can establish the kinds of policies where you're not only making sure that people can eat today, but you're making sure that they can acquire the kinds of experience, work experience, that they can create a record of work, an employment history, and work and live tomorrow. Madam Chair, the fact that our BEST program is looking at the re-engagement and has been able to realize the re-engagement of workers. The fact that it is a program that sees the investment in 80% of salary, where workers are being re-engaged, not necessarily to work in the tourism sector where they traditionally worked, because we still have not seen the return of visitors to the levels that we expect to see sometime from now. But to make sure that they can be re-engaged, earn a salary, to continue to upgrade their skills, to continue to practice whatever is their trade or their craft or their skill, so that once we start to emerge from this, that they remain employable, that they remain engaged. We know that the longer people stay outside the labor market, the harder it is for them to ever work again. And so these are the kinds of things that make sure that we bring about the economic security that must be our target in 2020 and beyond. Madam Chair, in BEST, we've seen over 37 firms re-engaged or engaged, half of which are from hotels and half approximately from direct tourism services. These 37 firms, and this is at the last update, I'm sure today it is many more, cover the re-employment of almost 2,000 workers. And apart from that, there have also been 20 who have been able to give us information on the investment element, where the fact that we've asked firms to do greening and do digitalization and these kinds of things that will also create work, new jobs, not just the re-engagement of workers, is also something that is about people's economic security and the longevity of their well-being. So, in closing, Madam Chair, I want to say that whenever we stand in this honorable place to address these kinds of programs, it is as a suite, as a system, as a part of an overall approach to the kind of life, the kind of place we want to create for all Barbadians and those who live here. And as the Honourable Member for St. Michael South said before me, I don't want us to separate what happened at Hero Square last evening from these conversations that we have in this chamber. They cannot be separated. Because when we talk about real emancipation, we are talking about emancipation of people's choices. We want to create a Barbados where just because you were born in a particular place doesn't mean that you have to have a particular job. And so when young Barbadians can imagine themselves as anything, anybody, anywhere, anytime, that is when we bring about real security of lives, of livelihoods, of promise, of a future and a world led and impacted by people who look like us and people who will not be silenced, will not be kept down in what they have to contribute and what they want to accomplish. These goals and these activities cannot be separated. And so, Madam Chair, with that brief close, I want to beg that head 13 in the amount of 22.5 million stamp part.
Beg to second that.
Question is that head 13, all honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. We think the ayes have it.
Head 11,
Ministry of Public Service in the sum of $106,000.
Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Madam Chair, a matter before the committee this afternoon relates to the Ministry of Public Service in terms of being able to ensure that the modernization effort can continue in terms of the critical infrastructure required for officers of that department to operate. You would recognize that obviously in administratively, the Ministry of Public Service as well as the rest of government have been undergoing reforms long before COVID with respect to our modernization efforts, and the sum of $106,000 being asked with respect to this head to be able to provide laptops and other necessary equipment to be able to, the department to be able to work seamlessly and to continue the enhanced IT integration for the government of Barbados. Let me at the outset indicate, Madam Chair, that as we have transitioned from one accounting system to another, from in terms of SmartStream up to Cloud Suite, which has seen some challenges. The reality is that the payroll function of government as well as the HR function of government continues, and therefore the focus here this afternoon is to ensure that we can accelerate the administration of a lot of the processes within the Ministry of Public Service. As you know, we recently appointed a number of persons who were in long-standing acting positions, and therefore it is our intention that with the infrastructure that we will put in with respect to the Ministry of Public Service, as well as the other support, that we will be able to enhance the internal administration as it relates to the good order with respect to the public service. And so therefore, Madam Chair, I beg to move that Head 11 stand by.
Question is that Head 11 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. No, 11, we did 13 already. Yeah.
Head 27, Ministry of Tourism and International Transport. Head 27, Ministry of Tourism and International Transport.
Honorable member
In the amount of $5,001,129.
Honorable member for Christchurch East Central.
Yes, Madam Chair. The sums of money in relation to this supplementary for the Ministry of Tourism relates to the Caribbean International Airways Limited, Madam Chair, which, as you know, is the parent company of Caribbean Aircraft Handling. Now, you would appreciate that in an environment such as COVID-19, where we have seen a significant reduction in activity as it relates to air travel, but equally, Madam Chair, with respect to the reduction in terms of even of cargo and the other services that particularly Caribbean Aircraft Handling would handle, that the last 6 months has proved to be quite challenging with respect to the operations of that particular entity. You heard in a real sense that whilst the government of Barbados has put in place the BEST program to be able to respond to a number of challenges with respect to a number of these entities, we have had two over the course of the last 6 months, given a significant reduction in revenue for a number of these entities, be able to give support to these entities in order to ensure that they can remain as viable as possible. Let me reiterate, Madam Chair, that in this particular head, the standard obligations with respect to the operations of Caribbean International Airways Limited, parent company of Caribbean Aircraft Handling, obviously would be responsible for ensuring that given the reduction in the operations with respect to aviation services at the Grant Leonards International Airport, that obviously that would have impacted the revenue performance, was from an operational perspective, the cost structure would not have necessarily changed. Now, in conversation certainly between the board, the management, and certainly the employees of that institution, some of the workers, Madam Chair, opted for a voluntary separation, and therefore these funds are here today to give the Caribbean International Airways the opportunity to respond to the requests from some of the employees who determined that they wanted to voluntarily separate from these entities. I speak subject to correction, but I believe there's 206 persons who opted for the voluntary separation package, and therefore these sums of monies, in addition to vacation pay and all of the other obligations associated with that, as well as settlement with respect to some of the suppliers, these monies are here today to be able to resolve those financial obligations on the part of Caribbean International Airways Limited, which, as I said, is the parent company of Caribbean Aircraft Handling. Now, Madam Chair, we as a government have been very focused on ensuring that we can keep this Barbados economy open. We have resumed, or I should say, international commercial flights have resumed. You've seen the uptick with respect to cases of COVID-19 from our major source markets continue to rise, and therefore the challenge certainly for Barbados as a logistics hub, certainly not just for Barbados, but equally we move a lot of stuff from here to the Eastern Caribbean, and therefore the impact of the operations in terms of Caribbean aircraft handling, but certainly the logistical impact that it also has on the rest of the Eastern Caribbean is not lost on the government of Barbados. And therefore, we have to be in a position to ensure that entities are, whether public or private, are capable, Madam Chair, of being able to stay around and be solvent in order to ensure that whenever COVID-19 dissipates, that the capacity for both the public sector as well as the private sector entities operating in Barbados, and I dare say, Madam Chair, across the rest of the region, will be capable of helping to move these economies as we move forward. And so these sums of money is being asked today to regularize certainly those payments with respect to the voluntary separation for the persons who opted in that respect. And therefore, we will continue to monitor the situation as it relates to certainly the operations of the aviation sector into Barbados. We are very conscious that with the trajectory as it stands, certainly across Europe and North America, as it relates to the increasing COVID-19 cases on a daily basis, presents a challenge certainly going forward, but we will continue to work with all of the governments involved, current and those to come, to ensure that the relevant protocols will be put in place for us to be able to manage travel safely, such that we can get back to normal as soon as possible. And therefore, Madam Chair, I beg to move that Head 27 in the amount of $5,001,129 stand back.
Question is that Head 27 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. You were slow. Honorable member for St. James Central.
Ma'am, either I was a little slow on the
Yeah,
off
I
the
was
mark,
looking
or you were
around.
quick on the uptake, ma'am. But I am grateful to you for acknowledging me, and I feel constrained, ma'am, to say a few words on this matter, and therefore I'm grateful to you for your indulgence. Ma'am, if I could perhaps be a little bit more fulsome than my honorable friend who just took his seat. I think that there's a very important story that needs to be told on this matter, and I take the opportunity to do so now. It is important, ma'am, for us to understand and appreciate that Caribbean Aircraft Handling is really a subsidiary of Caribbean International Airways Limited, which was created under the Companies Act in 1970. And Caribbean International Airways Limited, though it carries the title that would lead you to believe that this was a major airline, it didn't fly anywhere. And ma'am, it really has been in the business of duty-free services, etc., under contract at the Grantley Adams International Airport. I think the most interesting part of the story, however, is that the Caribbean International Airways will derive its revenue from the management fee it has with the subsidiary that it owns, which is Caribbean Aircraft Handling Limited. And that is the entity that attracts our attention today. Now, Caribbean Aircraft Handling Limited, ma'am, earns its keep through a variety of services, some of which are meet and greet services at the airport. There are others which are ramp-oriented, the servicing of the aircraft, etc., passenger handling, aviation, security, cargo. And in fact, ma'am, in an era where we are often very quick to lambaste and to be less than complimentary about the role that state-owned enterprises play and reflect negatively about their efficiency and competitiveness, it must be said that Caribbean Aircraft Handling controls 70% of that ramp and passenger handling business at Grantley Adams International Airport. Its competitor only has 30%, but the competitor is a very private sector oriented company in Barbados with a reputation of being a derivative of some of the most established businesses in the country. And I say that, ma'am, because it needs to be said in this place, in this House of Assembly, the People's House, that this is not an entity which is run-of-the-mill or that is can be taken for granted, but rather, ma'am, this is an example of the stellar type of work and the sterling type of contribution that can and is in fact made, can be and is in fact made by state-owned enterprises. Now, not to be contented by their demonstration of excellence, and I challenge anybody to defy that if you are in competition with the private sector and you're able to beat them at their game and control 70% of the market as opposed to the 30% that they have, I challenge anybody to tell me that you're not doing a good job. But not to be contented in that regard, then Caribbean Aircraft Handling, ma'am, and I have to say, under my watch at the time, then went a little bit further and started to do courier and logistics services. So they developed yet another revenue stream, and again demonstrated a nimbleness and a capacity to adjust in these difficult, those were pre-COVID times, in this difficult market to the requirements of being visionary and competitiveness in an effort to ensure one's success. Now, Caribbean Aircraft Handling, ma'am, services several clients. American Airlines, Air Canada, JetBlue, Virgin Atlantic, Copa Airlines, Liat, to name but a few. And again, it is very indicative of the contribution that they're making, that some of the largest of the international airlines that were servicing Barbados, and some, to some extent, still continue to serve Barbados, were doing so through the handling of Caribbean Aircraft Handling, which, as I said, handles 70% of the scheduled ground and handling business in the country. Now, ma'am, the challenge of COVID pandemic is obviously a major one. This virus, which is invisible to the naked eye, has humbled mankind the world over. And indeed, in countries where one might least have expected it, it is still to this day threatening to overcome our ability to manage it. One only has to look at today's news and see that 11 straight days of over 10,000 cases of COVID in Chicago in the mighty United States, and there's now a statewide shutdown being imposed in Chicago for the next month. And over 100,000+ new cases in the United States on a daily basis. We saw last week what happened in the United Kingdom, where they too have gone back into shutdown. And, you know, ma'am, I pause at this stage only to make the observation that as you listen again to today's news, you hear the lamentation in the United States of the challenge of getting people who have to do contact tracing to be able to manage the task of contact tracing appropriately. You hear, coming out of the United States, the concern that there is an inadequacy and an uncertainty about testing, and that sometimes a person is tested and they test positive, and then the next day they test negative, and then you test them back again and they're positive, or some variation of that. And you know, ma'am, as I hear these things coming from the Mecca, so-called, and as we're led to believe, I have to reflect on the sterling contribution that was done by the Ministry of Health and under the sterling leadership of our Minister of Health, because these are not stories that you hear in little Barbados, ma'am. And I feel, again, from this place, that we must use these opportunities to remind all of those within the sound of our voice as to the substantial strides that this country is making as we continue to fight this important battle. But above and beyond the health side of it is obviously the economic issue, which is what brings us here. Because the ravages of COVID have obviously impacted our economy in a major way, and it has done so, ma'am, with respect to Caribbean Aircraft Handling, by virtue of the cessation of flights out of many of the major source markets that had to take place in March. And then in the aftermath of that, there was obviously tremendous pressure brought on the financial circumstances of that entity. Now, there's an entity, ma'am, that I've just demonstrated is doing exceptionally well. 70% of the market share is theirs. Again, an important story has to be told, because the minister in the Ministry of Finance who led this off made a very vital observation. This matter was not treated by way of just simply sending home people. This matter was not treated by disrespecting labor. This matter was not one of the cases that I have had to speak to in this place, ma'am, when I was tourism minister, of people looking at working class employees and saying to them that we're going to put you on a 3-month contract or some other useless piece of piffle that it does not enable the worker in any way to confront with any degree of certainty the circumstances of having to go and face a bank, or the circumstances of having to face a credit union or any other creditor, or be in a position where they can adequately look after the maintenance of their home, or the house repairs, or looking after the children, or any of the other fixed commitments that they have on a daily basis, keeping the motor car on the road. I can go on and on. You know the story, man, because your constituents and mine as well face it. This is not one of those stories. This is a situation, ma'am, where government led by example. And the issue of severance was a matter that people chose to participate in. And you were given an opportunity to signal whether you were interested in that or if you're not interested in that. And the number that the Honorable Minister had alluded to, I think is entirely correct. I was trying to see from my note, I believe it is correct to say, ma'am, that the company had a staff complement of 382 persons. And it was agreed that a loan should be sought from the National Insurance Department to assist the company in dealing with the matter of severance. And ma'am, the separation agreement was on a voluntary basis only, so that after the separation applications were accepted, the staff complement today will stand at 176 persons, 206 persons volunteered for or chose to trigger their severance. Now, ma'am, the company's financial position obviously has been compromised, and it has been compromised by circumstances induced by COVID, not by circumstances induced by bad management, not by circumstances created as a result of bad corporate practices or the lethargy or disinterest or incompetence of employees or any of the other things that you would hear say. Because again, there are those out there who saw that entity as a plum. Let me say so in here now too, that there are those people, even though they could not compete and could not get anywhere near half the market share that Caribbean Aircraft Handling had, they thought it was appropriate to approach government at many levels of government and say, well, there's a plum that we would like to buy. Why you want to buy it? Were you doing the same business and you can't get anywhere near the performance that Caribbean Aircraft Handling getting? Caribbean Aircraft Handling, I told one of them, should buy you. And I wish we could. I really wish we could. The reason why we couldn't, ma'am, is because the government was really in a situation of financial hardship generally as a result of the 10 years of squandermania that we had to deal with before we came into office. But this is how people start to see the public sector generally. And this is how people, I think, unwittingly and inadvertently trespass into the domain of disrespect of workers in statutory enterprises and in the public sector more generally. Because they feel that because there was a government that characterized itself, and unfortunately by extension, to some extent, the country, as a place of ineptitude, they feel that they got a right, even though they cannot do the business or demonstrate an ability to do the business as well as the public enterprise did, that they have a right to say, my pocket deep, let me get at that because we want that plum. No, ma'am, I can't tell you what's going to happen in the future, but I can tell you that the performance of Caribbean Aircraft Handling has been stellar and commendable. And I feel I have a duty as the former minister who presided over a period of time while that company not only grew, but developed new revenue streams, to say so on behalf of those employees who made it possible to send a signal to wider Barbados as to what they can achieve if only given the chance, the helping hand up, and the opportunity to perform. And that, in many cases, is all that workers in this country ask for, ma'am. Now, there was also the challenge, as I said, of the induced by COVID, of the financials facing the country. The Parliament needs to know that we do not come to this place lightly. And I say that for the benefit of the Leader of the Opposition, who obviously has a constitutional responsibility to cast a jaundiced eye in the direction of any effort to raise funding, and it is not a matter to be taken lightly. And I think I owe it to him to be able to speak more definitively to some of the challenges financially that the company confronted. Now, when LIAT 1974 Limited folded, it owed Caribbean Aircraft Handling some $2.9 million. That's a reality. And again, ma'am, that default of Caribbean Aircraft Handling Limited. You know, for a long time, long before this administration came into office, in fact, the government of Barbados, being a major shareholder in Caribbean, in LIAT, had to go out of its way to fight the battle of trying to keep that particular entity afloat. And that they are doing business with Caribbean Aircraft Handling, but often not able to pay their way appropriately, also had an impact on the local enterprise Caribbean Aircraft Handling. When COVID induced the global shutdown in air travel, Virgin Atlantic was one of the main customers of Caribbean Aircraft Handling. And ma'am, as you may be aware, Virgin Atlantic is currently in worldwide debt restructuring. As big as Virgin is, they are now globally locked into debt restructuring. And at the point of shutting down, ma'am, they owed Caribbean Aircraft Handling just under $1 million, $800 or 913,000. And the company, as a result of the restructuring process, will stand to lose about 20% of that amount, and then the remainder will be paid over installments over the next 2 years. Not to be left out of that mix was JetBlue. Again, another major partner of Caribbean Aircraft Handling. And it is important also to understand how these things come about, because the airline don't just arrive in Barbados and happen to be engaged by Caribbean Aircraft Handling. Equally, it could have been engaged by Civil Air Services. You know, the reality is that when the airline comes into the country, they do their due diligence. They look at pricing. They look at the structure of the company. They look at the operational record. They talk to other entities who are doing business with the competitors in Barbados, who are doing the ground handling, who are doing the passenger, the aviation security, who are doing the passenger services, who are doing the ramp operations, who are doing cargo. And they say, who are the people that we want to align ourselves with? And again, it is to the undying credit of Caribbean Aircraft Handling, ma'am, that they were able to persuade the likes of Virgin Atlantic, the likes of JetBlue, the likes of American Airlines to stand on their side of the fence. But when COVID would have been the cause of the shutdown and cessation of travel into Barbados of a commercial nature, JetBlue would have owed that company $700,000, which they had made a commitment to settle by June, and then that didn't come to fruition. And ma'am, as I am understanding it, because I left the ministry while that was still money owing, and as I'm understanding it, as far down as into the month of September, that was still a bill to be settled. I see your signal, ma'am, giving me only 2 more minutes. I wanted to use this intervention to help the country to understand why we must not look down our noses at our own. I want the people of Barbados to understand, ma'am, that there is no magic wand that says that the private sector, so-called, is pluperfect, and one that says government enterprises are doomed to fail and are inadequate and are incompetent or are lazy or staffed by operatives who don't know what they're doing. Because when we are able, as we can with Caribbean Aircraft Handling, to hold up for the world to see a success story that is born out of public enterprise, looking after labor and the sons and daughters of labor in a way that can make us all proud, being able to hold off the deep-pocketed amongst us who would come to seize it and claim it as their own, even though they can't compete with it, but they won't purchase it. And then, ma'am, we have to tell that story. So if I have, ma'am, trespassed deep into the domain of the time allotted to me, it is because I feel I have a duty to share with you, so you can share with your constituents why they should feel proud about what the government got, and why we should always be very cautious when we hear these capitalists amongst us say, well, we are big businessmen, and therefore, by definition, we are better able to run it for you. Because by definition, that ain't true. And Caribbean Aircraft Handling proved that ain't true. Because they could not beat Caribbean Aircraft Handling at its own game. They fell far behind. They couldn't even get half the market share that Caribbean Aircraft Handling had. Huh? And it got a little worse because of me. I plead guilty. Because I was determined to create a new revenue stream, which we did in logistics and courier services. And it is only COVID that humbug us. Well, I mean, that is beating everybody. But the reality is, ma'am, I feel that is something that when the little children tomorrow, or the university students next 10, 15 years look back, and the country once again is wrapped up in discussions about whether you should sell this or whether you should sell that. If ever we have a minister of finance like the one that we just got rid of, who used to stand in the parliament and say, tell me what to sell, tell me what to get rid of. If ever those sad days descend on Barbados again, ma'am, we must always be able to go back to Hansard and remember when a foolish fellow called Kerry said, an honorable member said, you know, there are some things that we have that we manage so well that we beat the private sector. And let us just reflect on that before we sell for a mess of pottage. I thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Honourable member for Christchurch East Central.
Yes, Madam Chair, I beg to move that head 27, stand part.
The question is that head 27 stand part. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 33, Ministry of Home Affairs, Information and Public Affairs, in the amount of $2,252,239.
Honourable member for Christchurch East.
Madam Chairman, the matter before you is a very short one, Madam Chair. This concerns a request for supplementary provision in the sum stated for the assistance with the maintenance of the prison, Her Majesty's Prison, Dodds. Ma'am, some time ago, the Cabinet last year had decided that the Ministry of Home Affairs should undertake a search for and a resolution of the maintenance issues at the prison. There have been issues with the contract at the prison, needing to enter another contract for the provision of services, trying to reduce the amount, the value of the contract, trying to see whether it could be more logistically streamlined. Because the prison as it stands now, Madam Chair, is an exceedingly high-tech institution. It's probably one of the most high-tech institutions in Barbados. For those who are familiar with Glenderry, the similarities between Glenderry and Her Majesty's Prison Dodds only extend to the fact that they both have bars. But even the bars themselves are of different materials. Her Majesty's Prison Dodds, ma'am, from the time you enter, every square foot of that compound is covered by cameras. Nothing can go in or get out of Her Majesty's Prison Dodds without it being seen. All of the gated entries are remotely controlled and monitored. Madam Chair, 2 gates can open at the same time. So if I'm trying to get from this section to where the leader of the opposition is, and there are 2 gates between there, once this gate that I'm at now is open, then that gate must actually be closed before the other one next in line is open. So it is a very, very high-tech place. The difficulty now comes in is being able to manage the maintenance of such a high-tech place. And being where the Her Majesty's Prison Dodds is now, in St. Philip, it is exposed as well to a lot of the salt air. So there's corrosion easily with the metal works. There's corrosion with the input points, and it needs to be maintained in a way that preserves the integrity of the system. Now, Madam Chair, it was agreed that we would seek out a new maintenance contract for the prison by way of public advertisements, locally, regionally, and internationally, because the IT necessary to operate a prison such as the one we have, it is not likely that all these skills will be found in Barbados. So we had to be very realistic in what we're looking for. We're looking for the best people or the best services at the best price to manage the maintenance of the prison to a standard that is befitting of the infrastructure that was invested in by the government of Barbados in creating the prison. Now, it was agreed that in the interim, until a new maintenance contract was awarded, that under Rule 239, we would procure the services of Detention Management Incorporated, DMI, to provide maintenance services for the prison from the December 1st, 2019 until March 31st, 2020, in the amount of Barbados $649,726.53, and to secure an upgrade of the prison's software in the sum of $192,000 VAT inclusive. Now, in accordance with that decision by Cabinet, the management of DMI was officially informed that the services of DMI will be procured to provide the maintenance services to the prison from December 1st to March 31st, 2020, broken down as follows. December 2019 would have been Barbados $170,000. January 2020, $170,000. February 2020, $154,563.26. And for March 2020, $156,863.27. Now, the Prisons Department requested a sum of $3,310,000 in the draft estimates of expenditure for the financial year 2020 to 2021. And this was to facilitate the payment of insurances, maintenance services for the prison, as well as maintenance of vehicles, office equipment, and furniture and fixtures. However, Madam Chair, only $1,260,000 was allocated. Well, the exact figure is $1,260,666 was allocated. Of this amount, $500,000 was provided under the maintenance contracts for the maintenance services to the prisons, and this amount has been proven to be inadequate to carry out the maintenance works for the prison. It should be noted that subsequent to the decision to procure a new contract, the Ministry of Home Affairs commenced the preparation of tendering documents for the provision of the maintenance services at Dodds, but delays were subsequently encountered in obtaining the approval of the tender documents by the Tenders Committee, who advised that the ministry should send out a request for proposals, inclusive of price proposals. Now, the Ministry of Home Affairs did not have within itself the expertise necessary to prepare the RFP document. So Sigma Solutions was contracted to prepare the RFP document. And although contracted in April 2020, they were only able to commence work on the RFP in May 2020. As a result of the national shutdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the RFP was submitted to the ministry in July for approval. The documents were submitted to the chairman, Tenders Committee for approval, and the closing date of September 9th, 2020 was given. At the close of the bids, it was revealed that 3 firms had actually collected their documents, but only 1 firm had submitted the bid to the chairman of the Tenders Committee, and that firm was DMI. Now, the chairman, because we're trying to be transparent, Madam Chair, and because of what it is that is at stake here, it was thought appropriate that we should tender again. Now, that puts us in a bit of a bind, Madam Chair, because while we're racking up payments to DMI in the interim, and if we're going to attend it again, then we have no funds left under the current allocation for the ministry for the maintenance of the prison, and we have to come back seeking additional funds or support from the consolidated fund. Madam Chair, as you can well understand, the maintenance of the security of the prison is of paramount importance, and this remains a major concern for the Ministry of Home Affairs. In order to ensure the security of the prison was not in any way compromised subsequent to March 31st, 2020, we continue to engage the services of DMI on a month-by-month basis pending the award of the contract. To date, the sum of $2,095,186.73 has been disbursed to DMI, inclusive of the sum of $843,426.53 approved by the Cabinet for December 1st, 2019 to March 31st, 2020 period. DMI is currently owed for the services provided during August and September of 2020, and we estimate that we are going to have to carry this through, Madam Chair, to at least to the end of the financial year. So that would take us now to an additional sum for the maintenance vote of $1,600,000 to meet the expected projections to the end of the financial year. Now, Madam Chair, I went into all of that detail because it was necessary to show that we're not randomly pulling figures. The former Minister of Home Affairs had been astutely pursuing this and pursuing the obtaining of a new contract for the maintenance. But everyone so far today has mentioned COVID-19 in their address, and I have no choice but to mention COVID-19. COVID-19 caused a delay in us being able to deal properly with the tenders and to properly procure the services for maintenance at the prison. Be that as it may, although we did have one company validly tendering, we did not want to use COVID as the excuse for entering back into contract with the exact same company without giving ourselves options in terms of the services which will be supplied, as well as the amount for those services. It is deemed appropriate, Madam Chair, with the Tenders Committee, in the Ministry and Cabinet itself believes it is appropriate for us to go back out, maybe advertise a little bit more widely to get the specialized services that we require. Madam Chair, I can't stand to speak on the issue of the prisons without pointing to the fact that it is not just the maintenance of the prisons that we're doing. Right now, there's a holistic review of all of the operations of the prisons. We're looking not just at the incarceration aspect of the prison, but what should inform prison programs going forward. The farming program at the prison, to use an example, is under review because we don't just want to have a farming program that seeks to supply the prison or the prisoners with vegetables, but we want to use that as a mode of enhancing the opportunities for rehabilitation and re-entry, reintegration into society. At this point in time, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but at this point in time, we're looking at something revolutionary. We're looking at dividing the prison acreage, the available agricultural acreage, into perhaps 5 different farms, allowing independent farmers to have access to those farms well under supervision of the prison. So it's not just going to be a prison-operated program, but they're going to use prison labor. Whether it's not going to be free labor, we are looking at a system where the prisoners will be able to bank, or the prison can hold in trust, the stipend that the prisoners would earn while they're working on the farm. It solves 2 issues. Quite often we let people out of prison. Persons serve their sentence and they go back into society. They don't have 2 cents to rub together. In many instances, they're not reaccepted by their family. They don't have any support system within the communities. And they go back into the exact same environment that landed them in prison in the very first place. So what this does is allows those who engage in this program to actually work and be productive while being able to secure some of that money as a cushion for when they are eventually released. The other thing it does, Madam Chair, if I am a farmer operating in this program and I have someone in the prison who is working on the program and the person is doing well, I find him to be a good worker, I find him to be innovative, I find him to be industrious. Then when that person comes out, if they can't find a job otherwise, or they're interested in furthering agriculture, they develop a passion for agriculture, well, that would be the person I'd first draw on. So it solves the other problem of how do we reintegrate them into society, how do we land them in a job, how do we provide services to allow them to actually make a meaningful contribution on the outside once they've served their time on the inside. Now, Madam Chair, I have a particular position where rehabilitation is concerned. As far as I am concerned, having been a lawyer for nearly 25 years, Madam Chair, and having been a criminal defense attorney for a large part of that, I believe when you have served your sentence, we call it paying your debt to society, but that is actually what it is. You have committed an offense, a penalty has been prescribed, and you have carried out that penalty. In the eyes of the law, your slate should be clean. The conviction still attaches to you, but your slate should be clean. You have done your duty, you have paid your penalty, you have made your amends, and you owe the state or Barbados nothing else. Now you, that person, should have a fair chance at starting a life or getting on with your life once you've come back outside. But that is the ambitious hope, but that is not the reality. Once you come out of prison, there is that stigma that attaches to you. It attaches to you when you go looking for a job. It attaches to you when you try to get into a relationship. All anybody needs to hear is that he went to prison. Anything happens, yours is the first name to be called. Anything happens in your area, the police come in knocking on your door. If we are serious, we have within our laws the possibility for expungement, Madam Chair, of convictions. And that is to lessen the blow for those persons where people don't actually know you. So you can get a clean certificate of character. So you can go applying for jobs somewhere where you're not necessarily known and starting with a clean slate or on the same footing as everybody else. Now, the reality is that sounds good, as again, in theory, and that's where people don't know you. But the reality for prisoners is Barbados is a small society. And when you come out, the fact that you have gone to prison or you have been a part of that system operates against you and is a hurdle that you constantly have to climb over for the rest of your life. And people don't care. If, Madam Chair, a man went to prison, for example, let's say he was smoking weed or he had over the allowable limit for weed, that does not mean he's a dishonest person. So that does not mean he should not be allowed to become a cashier somewhere, because his crime was not one involving dishonesty. And we tend to not make a distinction between what people go to prison for. I may be in a fight, Madam Chair. There's some people who frustrate me. There's some people who frustrate me tremendously. I have a very even temper. But let's say, for instance, myself, Madam Chair, and the honourable member for St. James North got in an altercation. And, Madam Chair, it may have been a matter of passions. I may hit him too hard, and I go to jail because I may have started it. But these things happen. When I come out, it doesn't matter I went to jail because there was a fight that went a little bit too far. In the eyes of society, he now come out of jail. And all of us are in the same bracket. And that stops people from getting on in life. So our approach to prison and the rehabilitative aspect of it, Madam Chair, needs to be one that we change. Interestingly, when I became the Minister for Energy and Water Resources, I took a decision that I'm going to allow some persons, allow job opportunities with some persons who had come out and who had been released from prison. And Madam Chair, I took a lot of heat for that. When we had a project going on, I tried to give jobs as widely as possible, but I secured certain jobs for people who had done time. There are a couple of people who had paid their debts to society, and they wanted to work on the road, digging the trenches, helping with the plumbing, doing the bottom line, the labor work. The labor work, I expected somebody to look up just now, Madam Chair, but doing the labor work with the Water Authority. And if you know, or you could hear the comments that were made and the flack that I got because those persons were given a chance. But if the government does not give them a chance, who will give them a chance? If we cannot bring them into our system, Madam Chair, and find some room for them, then civil society is not under the obligation either. Because we're the ones who determine what their debt was. We're the ones who determine exactly what had to be done by them to purge their crime. So if we have set that, and if we have deemed that they have served it, and we have deemed that they can be released, then, Madam Chair, there must be some space in government, within government, to give those persons a second chance. We have to have a serious second chance approach and a serious second chance program, Madam Chair. Otherwise, you're going to have a set of people who, they call them recidivists. They repeat their infractions. We're going to have a set of people who, by virtue of being unable to find an alternative to what they did before, will drift back into that, not just because that is what they know, but because they have no other choice at all. So I make no apologies in saying, as the Minister of Home Affairs, that I firmly believe we have to look at our prison system in its entirety. We have to look at our rehabilitation systems in their entirety. It does not just extend to the adults who serve at Her Majesty's pleasure or who have done time in our formal prison system, but it also has to deal with how we look at the young offenders, our laws that govern the young offenders, our criminal justice system as it relates to young offenders. We don't have to just try to figure out exactly what to do with them once they've committed an offense. We have to go even further and try to figure out and put in place enough social services and social resources, Madam Chair, to ensure that they don't offend in the first place. Children need constructive programs to keep them to keep their minds engaged and keep them out of trouble. Our educational system as well needs to be geared towards identifying those who are vulnerable, identifying those who, I won't say deviant, Madam Chair, but you know there are some children who are hyper and who tend to give trouble. Everybody knows who they are. You might have a niece or a nephew, you might have a child, you know a child in the neighborhood who's always the one whose name gets called when the window gets broken, when something gets stolen. You know those children. Before we get to the point of engaging those children in our judicial system, our criminal justice system, it is incumbent upon us as a government and us as a community to put measures in place, not just through the government, but including faith-based organizations, social services, community groups, to occupy our young people gainfully, give them every chance to succeed in what they're doing so that they don't have to engage the system. And Madam Chair, this is another thing. I want to compliment the Minister responsible for education and the decision of the government to try to make devices, electronic devices, available to all students in Barbados. Because what happens, whether we choose to accept it or not, we have layers of education in Barbados. Those who can afford to pay fully for their children can get the best education. Those who can afford the devices and all the textbooks, their children have an advantage that poorer families do not have. So as we are now transitioning, Madam Chair, from what we used to consider the traditional way of educating, the traditional way of learning, the traditional way of operating, the traditional way of sitting in Parliament, the traditional way of attending cabinet, we have to understand as well that if we do not put things in place to allow those most vulnerable families who have children to be able to compete and learn equally with the others who have the resources, then once again we're creating a class of persons who will engage the attention of the judicial system and the criminal justice system. So, Madam Chair, it is not just about maintaining at Her Majesty's Prison Dodds. It's not just about putting things in place to make life more useful for those who are in Dodds, right? But it's also at look at exactly what we can do as a country to keep our people out of the structured system, which is the criminal justice system. Madam Chair, one other thing, there had been a number of rumblings recently, and people validly asking, now that we've had restrictions to the visits in prison, and attorneys be able to see their clients in person in prison, and faith-based organizations and social services being able to deal directly with the prisoners. Because of COVID, prison being a closed community, you have to be very careful what goes into prison, because within the prison community, infections, diseases, viruses will spread like wildfire. So it was deemed necessary at the beginning of COVID to actually severely restrict certain things for the protection of those who are in our custody. I'm happy to say, having had the discussion with the superintendent of prisons yesterday, we had been awaiting donations of large screen TVs, Madam Chair, and more video electronic systems, so that we could have, for example, a church with multiple participants in it, or counseling sessions, or teaching sessions. So all of that infrastructure is almost in place, and is expected that by the 1st of November, that we'll be able to resume interactions with the faith-based organizations, with the social services. Attorneys can have more access to their clients, and their families will be able to communicate or see them a lot easier. As it is now, there are limited opportunities because of the limited IT resources that are at the prison. By the 1st of November, there should be significantly more capacity so that more persons can avail themselves of what I believe is their right. You have a right to be visited by your family. If the law provides for it, you have a right to it. You have a right to speak, to be able to communicate with your attorney. You have a right in prison to practice your faith, and if your faith requires instruction from someone who is not in the prison, then you have a right to be able to access that person. So all of these things are being put now in place, Madam Chair, and it should be active by the 1st of November. I have the assurance of the superintendent of prison, and we've been treating it as a priority. So for all of those who have been asking recently in the press and in interviews, Madam Chair, that is coming on stream by the 1st of November 2020. So sorry, Madam Chair, the 1st of December 2020. Madam Chair, it's been such a long time that I've been on lockdown. And in my own house and looking at four walls, that, Madam Chair, time almost has no meaning to me anymore. So the 1st of December 2020, Madam Chair. So, Madam Chair, I do ask that the supplementary provision, let me just get back to the exact number, Madam Chair, in the sum of $2,254,239 under Head 33, Ministry of Home Affairs, in particular Program 243, Subprogram 252, which is the Prisons Department. I do ask that that supplementary provision stand for.
Okay, that being said, question is that Head 33 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 81, Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources, in the sum of $19,873,560.
Honorable member for St. John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, before I make my presentation, I want to congratulate a former constituent of mine, the Honorable Member for St. George, North, and to share what may very well be a little bit of history here, because today, Mr. Speaker, she embarked on, Madam Chair, she embarked on a new journey, and today in this room, we had 2 sitting MPs and 1 former MP, Mr. Delay Bradshaw. And the history there, Madam Chair, is the fact that all 3 of us came from the same village in the constituency of St. John. And by extension, we have a product of Mr. Bradshaw, who's also a sitting MP. So there is something maybe special in this small village in the constituency of St. John. So I want to congratulate now my colleague, the Honorable Member for St. George North. Madam Chair, the matter before us is related to a project called the Water Supply Network Upgrade Project. And the funds being requested here by the committee is to complete that particular project at the Barbados Water Authority. Now, we are trying as best as possible at the ministry to create an oasis in this country that will ensure that all of the constituencies, including mine, that is now being impacted by a short supply or an irregular supply of water is fixed in the shortest period of time. These funds will go a long way in completing a number of initiatives that are under this particular project that we call What's Now. Now, the objectives of this project, 1, to upgrade of facilities, and this include water tanks and reservoirs, and that is happening, Madam Chair, all across the country where the need is in place. To reduce the operating costs of the BWA through the mains replacement program, the installation of solar voltaic panels, and to mitigate climate change. My constituency, Madam Chair, would have benefited in a significant way as it relates to the changing out of old mains that were currently in place. And this is happening not only in St. John, but it is happening in St. Joseph and St. Peter as well, and St. Lucie. I know the Honorable Member for St. Lucie will be pleased to hear that. So I want to suggest to those constituents, not only in St. John, that right now there is a little bit of discomfort because of the mains lane program, but this is the cost that we pay to ensure that everybody is satisfied with the output of water as a result of this particular project. And to provide some information about the project, further information about the project, we've completed the acquisition of pipes and fittings. The current areas that are in progress, we have the rehabilitation of 10 reservoirs and the erection of 4 tanks. To date, we have reservoirs at Half Acre, St. Lucie, Shop Hill in St. Thomas, Golden Ridge in St. George, and Providence in Christchurch. As it relates to the tanks, Madam Chair, we have Half Acre in St. Lucie, Mount Stepney in St. Peter, Indian Ground also in St. Peter, and Ellerton in St. George. And I would have mentioned before, Madam Chair, that the mains replacement program is extensive. To date, the target for this particular project was 23 kilometers, and we're pleased at this point in time to indicate that 22 kilometers out of those 23 are completed. So the truth is that the project is definitely taking shape, and this additional injection of capital will ensure that the project is successful and that we can have water flowing through the eastern corridors that are now being severely impacted as a result of that. Madam Chair, I want to touch on another area that is very, very dear to me, which I mentioned just now, the vineyard augmentation project that seeks to push water through that eastern corridor that I mentioned before. And plans are in train as I speak to ensure that contractors are coming in to put what may be considered to be the final piece of the puzzle in place, and this would be the erection of two 7,000 gallon tanks at Mount Pleasant in the constituency of St. John. The laying of pipes is well in advance, even though that we were impacted by rain and we would have missed out probably on a week by now as it relates to the progress of that particular project. But all plans are in place to have water flowing in that particular corridor by Christmas. We're saying Christmas water. The truth is that the project date is expected to come in early January, but we are optimistic that we can deliver this project on time and within the budget so that persons, yes, holy water minister, member of the city, Christmas water. So that is really and truly on the way. The majority of the contractors who are working on that particular project are well in advance of where the targets that they would have set prior to the start. Madam Chair, all over the country you would realize that it seems as if the ministry on a whole, but BWA are working on projects. We are currently involved in the project as it relates to the Highway 1 project.
Remember, just to interrupt you, sorry, we are pressed for time as it is, so kindly go as quick as
Not a
you
problem, ma'am. I will wrap. I will take your cue. But we're involved in that project. Another exciting project, and I will probably close on this, Madam Chair, is the fact that we're looking at a water-saving project. And this particular one will involve the use of water-efficient toilets, the use of water-efficient shower heads, and efficient faucets within the household. And we believe that if these particular projects can come to fruition, that we will go a long way as it relates to ensuring that water, and like I said, that oasis is in place for everyone across the country. The staff at the BWA, very, very skilled. The expertise that is required to make all of this happen is present there. Madam Chair, I now beg that Head 81 stand par.
I'd like to second it.
Question is that Head 81 stand par. Jeffrey. Question is that Head 81 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. And then, we can see ayes have it.
Head 87, Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, in the sum of $133,000.
Zero. Honorable member for St. Michael's Southeast.
How much time exactly you are allocating to me, since my other colleagues have clearly taken up a substantial portion of the time with the other matters. So just clarify that for me first, please.
15 minutes, please.
Thank you. Ma'am, Head 87 relates to the sum of $133,000 being allocated to provide funding for the following temporary posts for an education reform unit in the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training. The two positions being created would be the Director of Education Reform and a Deputy Director of Education Reform. Ma'am, I believe it is well known to the entire country that we have had to look at reforming the educational system. We've been trying to do this for some time across the various administrations. But this administration has basically promised the people of this country that we would do a number of reforms in education, I believe dating back to the last curriculum reform document, which was sometime back in 2000. There's really been minor changes made, for instance, to the curriculum in the country. And as a consequence, we felt that we needed to not only look at curriculum, but we needed to look at wider reforms in education. It therefore requires, ma'am, the establishment of what we describe as a project unit, which is going to be tasked with the responsibility of looking at things like curriculum, also tasked with the responsibility of looking at the transition away from the 11 plus, the common entrance examination, which I know, ma'am, has created much debate on the announcement that we intend to abolish the common entrance examination. And of course, people are asking, what are we going to replace it with? And therefore, it has been felt that to allow a dedicated unit within the ministry to pay attention to this particular area is perhaps the best way for us to start the conversation with the country on not just 11 plus, but on all of the other reforms that are necessary. I also want to mention, ma'am, that as we prepare for the jobs of the future, given the fact that many of the jobs that exist today are not certainly going to exist 10 years or even 5 years from now, it is important that we prepare our young people for the world of work that will look very differently from what we are accustomed to. As a consequence, we therefore need to weigh in from people not only locally, regionally, but also internationally to be able to help us to shape the educational curriculum to make it relevant to the needs of our students, but also to assist us as we try to transform the Barbados economy to ensure that we have young people who are equipped for the world of work. And as such, we would see that we have obviously embarked on introducing things like coding, robotics, and we're even in some discussions with persons at universities in Canada regarding the area of artificial intelligence as well. It therefore means, Madam Chair, that we have to take some risks, we have to take some advice from outside, we have to basically be very clinical in the way in which we start to approach reforms, particularly because this is a period where we're going to have to talk the country through the level of reforms that may be necessary, whether it is from the nursery system, the primary system, or the tertiary system. We're going to have to talk the country through the nature of the reforms that are necessary to be able to stop or people from saying young people are coming out of school with no certificates, or that a child has spent the greater part of his or her life in the educational system, but has come out perhaps with a skill, but while they were in school, they were certainly not able to tap in through the current educational system into being able to properly explore their talent. So we want to be in a position to address a lot of the deficiencies that currently exist in the present system, while at the same time recognizing that we have obviously made significant strides over the years in having a well-oiled machinery in terms of our educational landscape. But there are some areas that I do feel that we now need to hone in on, that we need to re-examine. We have to ask ourselves some serious questions as to whether these systems have been serving us well, and to re-examine the opportunities that exist for us to be able to expand our curriculum, expand the offerings across the system, and certainly be able to align the government's agenda certainly with what our students are learning at the university, as well as what they're learning in secondary, primary, and nursery school, ma'am. And therefore, this unit is intended to drive those reforms. It is intended that working in tandem with the main ministry, along with all of the various stakeholders, the unions, the teachers, principals, that we will be able to have a series of consultations across the country that will begin the discussion about the new system that we are proposing. It is also intended that those stakeholders will be given a full opportunity to weigh in, and indeed the general public as well as our students, to be able to weigh into what is working and what is not working as we try to find the best fit for certainly the 21st century and beyond. I am excited, ma'am, because I believe that back in the days when the Honorable Prime Minister was Minister of Education, she underwent a number of major reforms in education and best known for EduTech, which I believe very strongly that were we to have continued on the trajectory that we were on in relation to the vision that was at that point exposed, that we would certainly have been able to be better prepared for COVID-19. And the fact that we've now had to move to an online environment in a blended way for the most part, but certainly being able to have the use of technology as a very main part of the way in which young people are now learning. And therefore, this presents a very unique opportunity, I think, in our history, as we're investing in over 21,000 devices coming into the country shortly, as well as robotics kits that will obviously allow our young people to learn coding and robotics. It will allow us certainly to prepare for the next phase of our development. And so I think the next few months are certainly going to be exciting. It will allow the unit to hone in on the issues, but more importantly, ma'am, I'm also excited that it will give us an opportunity to reform the Ministry of Education in terms of the main ministry as well, because reforms will mean nothing if the very stakeholders that have to implement the policy don't buy into the concept and the vision. And therefore, we appreciate that we will have to look at change management, how our principals relate to the ministry, how our ministry relates to principals and to teachers, how we relate generally to the union and to our various stakeholders. And therefore, it is not just a reform at the level of the educational system, but also a reform in the way in which we think about our educational system, how we treat to the people who are part of the educational system as well. And so I certainly look forward over the course of the next few months to the establishment of this unit, working very closely with the current Chief Education Officer, all of the technical staff, the Permanent Secretary, and all of the heads of the departments, to be able to have them weigh in as well on what the challenges are, but also together to be able to find solutions to a lot of the long-standing problems that we have been encountering over the course of the past few years in particular. And so, Madam Chair, this head, therefore, is seeking to create the temporary positions for the Director of Education Reform, as well as a Deputy Director of Education Reform. It will take us to the end of this particular financial year. And of course, as we get the ball going from December 1st, I believe is the target date for us to have the unit in place. The intention is that we will work then to engage with the country and start to roll out the various reforms that are necessary within the Ministry of Education. So the sum of $133,000 is provided under this head, and I therefore, Madam Chair, with those few words, beg that Head 87 do now stand part.
Very good. Honorable Member for St. John? Oh, you seconded it? Okay. Question is that Head 87 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. Honorable Member for St. Michael Southeast.
Madam Deputy Chair, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and report progress to His Honor, the Speaker. Sorry, passing of one money resolution in Standing Finance Committee.
Question is, I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one money resolution in the Standing Finance Committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one money resolution in Standing Finance Committee. We had the first time. I remember Christchurch, East Central.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read a first time.
Questions that this resolution be read the first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read a second time.
The questions that this resolution be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The questions that this resolution be now agreed to. All of the honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution now stands passed.
Committal, sir, of announcements. Going to indicate that there was a vacancy.
Huh? Yeah. Right. A vacancy has arisen as a result of the resignation of the former Deputy Speaker, the former member for St. George North. In relation to the standing, yes, in relation to the standing orders committee. Right. In accordance with Standing Order 60.9, I hereby nominate the new Deputy Speaker, the Honorable Member for St. Michael Northwest, to take the place as a member of the committee whose seat has who has resigned.
You're jumping ahead.
Army Leader Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest be appointed to the Standing Finance Committee. Standing Orders Committee, sorry.
The question is that the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest be appointed to the Standing Order Committee. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest is hereby appointed to the Standing Order Committee.
Recommittal of government notices.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Central Bank of Barbados Bill 2020.
Seconded. Sorry. Not there, sorry. Eureka Middle. Eureka Middle, sir, of first readings of bills.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Central Bank of Barbados Bill 2020.
Now you can come in.
Questions at the aforementioned bill be ready the first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we have come to the end of today's proceedings. It would be remiss of me if I too, in my closing, did not also extend a warm welcome to the Honourable Member for St. George North. I don't think it needs repeating how exceedingly pleased I am that she has joined this chamber, but I do feel it necessary to reiterate the sentiments expressed by the Honourable Prime Minister that the Barbados Labour Party has yet again been able to join itself with the Labour movement at a very difficult time. And I am looking forward to the Honourable Member being able to add significant value, certainly to this government at this point in time, but certainly to the debates in this particular chamber. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this sitting be adjourned until the 1st of December. And in so doing, I would want to wish everyone a happy independence at this point in time. It is not going to be the traditional way in which we would celebrate independence, but I do expect that we have come to the understanding that this is perhaps our new norm, and in many cases we will be able to engage with our public, certainly virtually, in relation to the various activities that have been planned for that particular weekend. I do hope that all of the members, it's a short break again for members, certainly also for all of the persons who help us to put together these sit-ins on a regular basis. And I do hope that Barbadians will reflect on this moment, particularly after the yesterday's event with the removal of Lord Nelson. I think it is certainly a time where we should renew our understanding of who we are as a people, and certainly where we have come from, but certainly reflecting on where we need to go as well. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I would beg to move that this sitting be adjourned until the 1st of December at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honorable chamber be adjourned until the 1st day of December at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 1st day of December at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.